My wife was diagnosed with cancer. I quit my job, sold property, and stayed by her side for 7 years as she fought the disease. On her deathbed, she grabbed my hand and, to her arriving first love, said, "Alex, if I hadn't married him back then, would I have avoided all this suffering? He wouldn't even buy me the best imported drugs." I clutched the medical bill for the medication I had just scraped together, feeling chilled to the bone. Those 7 years I ate instant noodles, slept in the hospital corridor, spent every last penny on her, and yet I ended up with a reputation of being stingy. I was reborn on the day she was diagnosed with cancer, just as the doctor was discussing treatment options with me. She secretly messaged her first love. "Hurry to the hospital. He definitely can't come up with the money. You decide for me." I looked at the content on the phone screen and signed the consent form to refuse treatment. In this life, if you want to find someone who can give you the best life, I won't stop you. Just don't make me use my sincere heart only to receive your indifference. The smell of disinfectant in the hospital was acrid. I stood in the corridor outside the consultation room, my head buzzing. The doctor's words just now cut through my nerves like a dull knife. The test results for Sophia Taylor are back. Liver cancer advanced. Every single character weighed 1,000 pounds. I braced myself against the cold wall to barely stay upright. 7 years. That moment struck me like a bolt of lightning. I returned to 7 years ago, the day Sophia Taylor was just diagnosed. All the memories surged in like a tide, instantly overwhelming me. Quit the job I was rising in. Sell the meticulously renovated marital home we had. Moved from city to city seeking treatment. The cold chairs and hospital corridors became my bed for countless nights. The taste of instant noodle seasoning packets still makes my stomach churn when I think of it. At the final moment, her pale hand was tightly gripping someone else's, not mine. It was the man called Alexander Brown. She was breathless, but with her last strength, she said to Alexander Brown, "Alex, if I hadn't married him back then, would I have avoided all this suffering?" He couldn't even bring himself to buy me the best imported medicines. In my hand at that moment, I was clutching the bill for the next expensive round of medication that I had just managed to scrape together. At that moment, every drop of blood in me went cold. 7 years of devotion, pouring out my heart and soul, losing everything. In return, it was merely the words "can't bear to let go." The overwhelming sense of absurdity and the sting cut so deep I could hardly breathe. And now, I'm starting over. "Mr. Johnson?" The doctor's voice pulled me back from my memories. He looked at me, his eyes carrying a professional sympathy. "As for Ms. Taylor's treatment plan, we need to decide as soon as possible. Right now, there are a few options: conventional chemotherapy, or trying some new targeted drugs that might work better, but the cost." The doctor's words overlapped with my memories. I remember last time I almost without hesitation chose the most aggressive and also the most expensive regimen. I said to the doctor decisively, "Use the best drugs. Money is not the issue." Then I began that 7-year hellish journey. This time, I didn't answer immediately. My gaze fell on the slightly ajar gap of the consultation room door. Sophia Taylor was half leaning on the hospital bed, looking down at her phone. Her fingers flew over the keys. Her profile still held the delicate beauty I remembered, but there was a faint restlessness I had missed in my past life. A thought sprang up, uncontrollably. With a word, she spoke to Alexander Brown on her deathbed, really just the delirium of a grave illness. As if guided by some force, I reached for my phone. Sophia Taylor and I had matching couple phones. The passcode was our wedding anniversary. I had always respected her privacy and never checked her phone. But at this moment, a cold intuition compelled me. I entered the password. The screen unlocked. WeChat was still open. The top contact was Alex. The last message was sent a few minutes ago. From Sophia Taylor. "The doctor says I'm in bad shape and need a lot of money for treatment. He definitely can't come up with that much. Come to the hospital quickly. Help me decide. I'm afraid he'll delay my treatment to save money." Each word stabbed into my eyes like a needle. A cold chill shot up from the soles of my feet and spread through my whole body. So, from the very beginning of the diagnosis, in her heart, I had already been a husband who would delay her to save money. It turned out she had long been seeking help from another man, placing her hopes on someone else. During those 7 years, were all my struggles and sacrifices, in her eyes, more like a ridiculous one-man show, or even a kind of miserly proof? "Mr. Johnson?" The doctor called me again, with a questioning tone. I looked up and looked at the doctor. The doctor before me overlapped with and diverged from the tired, anxious faces from the 7 years in my memory. I took a deep breath. The smell of disinfectant in the air made me unusually clear-headed. The volcano in my heart that had burned for her for 7 years, even consuming myself, had completely gone out. Only cold ashes remained. I spoke, my voice so calm even I was surprised. "Doctor, we'll opt for conservative treatment." The doctor seemed a little surprised. With conservative treatment, it's mainly to relieve pain. It may not control the disease. I cut him off and said clearly, "I understand. I'll sign." I took the blank treatment consent form from the doctor's hand. I did not hesitate at all in the family signature section. I wrote, "Forfeit aggressive treatment. Choose palliative care." Then I signed my name, Ethan Johnson. Shoching, guarding sincerity. This name, over the past 7 years, has been like a tightening headband wrapped around my head. Now, I don't want to guard it anymore, and I can no longer keep guarding. I took the signed papers and pushed open the clinic door. Sophia Taylor immediately put down her phone, her face shifting into a fragile, helpless expression. "Ethan, what did the doctor say?" Her voice carried a deliberate tremor. "Is it going to cost a lot?" Last time, I held her tenderly and told her not to be afraid, that I was here. This time, I just looked at her calmly. "The doctor said the situation isn't optimistic. The specific plan still needs to be determined by consultation." I didn't bring up the matter of signing. Sophia Taylor's brows knitted slightly, as if displeased with my calmness. She instinctively glanced at her phone again. "Then, what about the money?" she asked softly. "Our family doesn't have much in savings." I walked to the window and looked at the bustling crowd below. "There will always be a way," I said lightly. But inside I was utterly indifferent. A way? Last time, I tried every possible way and exhausted myself. This time, figure it out yourself. Haven't you already called someone who can make the decision for you? I'm waiting. The ward was very quiet. Sophia Taylor leaned against the headboard, restless. She kept glancing toward the door, then at me. I was no longer the husband who frantically ran around making calls to raise money. It made her very uneasy. "Ethan, won't you call your parents or your friend?" she asked tentatively. "Ask about what?" I turned to look at her. "About money," she said, a bit anxious. "Treatment can't wait. It can't really wait." I agreed, but took no further action. She bit her lip, her face turning even paler. I knew what she was waiting for. She was waiting for Alexander Brown. Alexander Brown was her first love. It was said his family was well off, and he ran a small company of his own. By our classmate standards, he was doing well. Back then, Sophia Taylor choosing me instead of Alexander Brown surprised a lot of people. After we married, when we'd bicker occasionally, she would sometimes blurt out, "If I had chosen Alexander Brown back then, would I be living like this?" I always took it as a spiteful remark and would soothe her, and it would pass. Now that I think about it, maybe that was the truest thought in her heart. The door was pushed open. A man in a suit, his hair slicked back, walked in. He was also carrying a fruit basket. It was Alexander Brown. He looked somewhat younger than 7 years later, his brow carrying a businessman's characteristic shrewdness and a touch of deliberately cultivated concern. "Sophie." He walked straight to the hospital bed, his tone exaggeratedly pained. "What happened? Is it serious?" Sophia Taylor's eyes instantly reddened. Wronged, dependent, and with a fragility she had never shown in front of me. "Alex," her voice choked. "You came." She glanced at me, her expression a little complicated, but she quickly turned to Alexander Brown, as if finding her anchor. I stood where I was like an outsider, watching this long-awaited reunion unfold with a cold eye. "This is Mr. Johnson, right?" Alexander Brown seemed to notice me for the first time, extending his hand with a condescending politeness. "I'm Alexander Brown, Sophie's friend." I did not shake his hand, only nodded. "Ethan Johnson." Alexander Brown's hand froze in the air for a moment, awkwardly withdrawn. Then he turned to Sophia Taylor, and his tone became serious. "What did the doctors say specifically? What treatment is needed? Don't worry about the money. I'm here." He spoke passionately. Sophia Taylor's tears fell even harder. "The doctor said we need to use the good medicine, imported, very expensive." She sobbed. "Ethan, you know our family situation?" She didn't finish her sentence, but the meaning was clear. He deftly pushed the financial pressure and the dilemma of choice in front of me. Last time, it was under this kind of pressure that I was forced into a decision that ruined our family. This time, I remained silent. Alexander Brown looked at me, his brow slightly furrowed, with a tone of reproach. Mr. Johnson, that's where you're wrong. Sophie's illness can't be put off. Money is external. People are the most important. At a time like this, the man has to step up. He spoke grandly, as if he were the one with the greatest sense of responsibility. Other patients and their families in the ward also cast glances over, subtle but unmistakable. Whispers began to rise. Yes, treatment is the priority. Why isn't that man saying anything? Doesn't look like he's keen on spending money. At least their friend understands what's reasonable. Spectators are always like this, easily swayed by appearances, quick to pick a side to display their sense of justice. They can't see the ramen I ate to save every penny in my previous life, nor the helplessness I felt in the hallway late at night. They only saw, at this moment, a generous friend, a silent husband, and a pitiful patient. Such an easy situation to judge. Sophia Taylor, amid Alexander Brown and those murmurs, seemed to have gained a certain confidence. She looked at me, her voice carrying a faint, barely perceptible insistence. Ethan, Alex means well too. Say something. Are you going to treat her or not? All the pressure seemed to fall on me. They were waiting for me to, like in my previous life, beat my chest and shoulder the burden alone. I lifted my head, my gaze calmly sweeping over Alexander Brown, finally resting on Sophia Taylor's face. Treat. Of course we should treat him, I said slowly. Both Sophia Taylor and Alexander Brown's eyes brightened slightly. The murmurs around us quieted a bit as if they thought I had come to my senses. But I continued. However, the doctor said there are several treatment options. Which one to use depends on the actual situation and the family's ability to bear it. The best medicine isn't necessarily the most suitable. My words were like a bucket of cold water, dousing the small spark of hope that had just risen. Alexander Brown immediately retorted, Mr. Johnson, that's wrong of you. When treating illness, you must use the best medicine. Just because it's expensive doesn't mean you shouldn't use it. This is a matter of life and death. Exactly. How could you think like that? The murmurs rose again. Sophia Taylor looked at me, her eyes full of disappointment and disbelief. Ethan, what do you mean? I looked at them, at each of those faces that had been correctly hijacked. There was no ripple in my heart. I slowly reached into my pocket and took out the copy of the Do Not Pursue Aggressive Treatment consent form I had just signed. I gently placed it on the table beside the hospital bed. Black characters on white paper, clear as day. I've decided to choose conservative palliative treatment. This is the consent form. In an instant, the ward was deathly silent. Sophia Taylor widened her eyes and stared fixedly at the paper, as if she couldn't recognize the words on it. Alexander Brown was stunned too. He clearly hadn't expected me to be so direct, even so heartless. The murmured whispers around us turned into audible gasps and accusations. Oh my God, giving up treatment. Isn't that the same as? How can he be so heartless? That's his wife. He looks decent. How can he do this? I knew it, something was off just now. The blind conformity and malice in human nature were laid bare in that moment. They had no idea what was really going on. They were quick to judge me based solely on what they saw. Alexander Brown reacted first. He snatched up the paper, glanced at it, then angrily yelled at me. Ethan Johnson, are you even human? Sophie is your wife. How could you sign to give up treatment? Aren't you just pushing her toward death? Sophia Taylor finally let out a wah and cried, collapsing onto the hospital bed as her shoulders heaved violently. Why? Ethan, why are you doing this to me? She cried her heart out, as if bearing the greatest injustice. Alexander Brown pointed at my nose. I'm telling you, Ethan Johnson, if you won't treat her, I will. I'll pay this money. I'm Alexander Brown. The words hit like a clap of thunder. It exploded in the ward. It also exploded in Sophia Taylor's ears. Her crying miraculously grew a little quieter, peeking over with a hint of hope. The onlookers were also stunned by this reversal, then promptly exclaimed, Look, now that's a real man. Ah, what a shame, such a good woman. This husband is such a scoundrel. Thank goodness a friend helped. Adversity reveals true feelings. I listened to it all, feeling only like laughing. Look at that, how touching. Hero rescues beauty. The moral high ground was firmly occupied by Alexander Brown. As for me, I became the cold-blooded, stingy, unworthy husband in everyone's eyes. Exactly what I wanted. I looked at Alexander Brown, whose performative streak was getting the better of him, and at Sophia Taylor, who seemed to have glimpsed the hope of a better life. Nodded. His tone even carried a hint of relief. "All right, Mr. Brown, then Sophia Taylor, I'll leave her in your care." After saying that, I turned and walked straight out of the ward. Not a trace of reluctance. Behind me were Sophia Taylor's incredulous sobs, Alexander Brown's pretended consolations, and the assorted murmurs of onlookers. None of this has anything to do with me anymore. Sunlight streamed through the hospital corridor windows, a bit glaring. But I felt this was the first time in 7 years I was breathing free air. In this life, fight for your own way to live. I traded my sincere heart for a cold, callous game. It's over. I didn't go home. That so-called home had long since lost its warmth during the 7 years of suffering in my previous life. I went to the riverside on the outskirts of the city and sat alone for a long time. The river ran muddy and slow, unable to carry away the heavy past. Scenes from my past life kept flashing back. Sophia Taylor vomiting after chemotherapy, me awkwardly patting her back. When she was sometimes feeling better, she would smile and say where she wanted to go once she recovered. Even in her final moments, she held Alexander Brown's hand and uttered that soul-crushing line. And I gripped the medical bill, standing outside the ward, my whole body numb with despair. Why? Why did I give everything, only to receive such an appraisal? Could it be simply because what I gave wasn't what she truly wanted? She wanted someone like Alexander Brown, who could provide the best life, not someone like me whose wholehearted devotion came off as shabby companionship. Until dusk fell and my phone began to vibrate nonstop. It was my mother calling. There were also several voice messages from Sophia, Taylor's mother. Opening them revealed scolding choked with tears. "Ethan, what's wrong with you? Sophie says you stopped caring for her. How could you sign to give up treatment? That's your wife. Are you crazy? Hurry back to the hospital. Our Johnson family doesn't have someone as heartless as you." See, the public reaction is spreading faster than I expected. Sophia Taylor had already quickly mobilized her camp. I took a deep breath and dialed my mother's number. "Mom, Ethan, what on earth are you doing? Is what Sophie said true?" My mother's voice was full of anxiety. "Mom, listen to me." I try to keep my voice steady. "It's not like she said." "What do you mean? Giving up treatment? Is that something a person would do?" "The doctor said her disease is advanced and the chances of a cure are slim." I selectively stated the facts. Even the most aggressive options would only extend her life by a few months to a year, but the process is very painful and the costs are huge, enough to ruin the whole family. There was a moment of silence on the other end of the line. "Ethan, you cannot treat her." Mother's voice lowered, strained. "That's a life." "Mom," I said in a low voice, "if I ruin myself, end up deep in debt, only to buy her a few more months of suffering, and to earn her line I couldn't bear to spend money on her, do you think it's worth it?" "What?" Mother was stunned. On the day she was diagnosed, she secretly messaged and called in her first love, Alexander Brown. I continued, my tone calm but cruel. She had Alexander Brown make the decision for her because she thought I couldn't come up with the money and would delay her. She had long since arranged an escape route for herself. In her mind, Alexander Brown was the one who could save her, and I was only a husband to be guarded against, someone she might be reluctant to spend money on. Mother drew a sharp breath on the other end of the phone. "Impossible. Sophie, Mom, I saw the messages on her phone with my own eyes. I cut her off. I'm tired. 7 years, I'm tired." On the last few words, I let the real exhaustion show. Not just the fatigue from this life, but the weariness piled up from my past life as well. My mother remained silent for a long time. I could hear her labored breathing. She was a traditional woman, spent her life on the family, and believed it was shameful for spouses to abandon each other in hard times. But my words, like a thorn, pierced her heart. "But what will outsiders say about you?" In the end, this was what she worried about. "I don't care anymore," I said. "Reputation isn't as important as staying alive." After hanging up on my mother's call, I turned my phone off. The world quieted down. I sat by the river a while longer, until the night had fully fallen. Then I got up and checked into a small inn. I need to make a proper plan for how I should live this life. First, money. In my previous life, To pay for Sophia Taylor's treatment, I quit my job, sold a house, and exhausted all my savings. This time, I can't follow the same path. I used to work at a design institute. The income was steady, but not generous. I haven't handed in my resignation yet. After all, I was just diagnosed today. But that job had limited prospects and wouldn't be enough to support my future life. I remember that within these past few years, there were several very good opportunities. A college classmate once invited me to join his startup tech company, but at the time I declined because Sophia Taylor wanted me to have a stable job. There was also a project about renovating old residential neighborhoods that was very profitable, but it required some capital and a lot of effort. In my previous life, I also missed it because of Sophia Taylor's illness. Now, all of those can be reconsidered. And the house. The house we live in now was bought with the down payment my parents gave when we got married, and we've been paying the mortgage together. It's not very big, but the location is decent. In my previous life, I quickly sold it at a low price to raise money. In this life, I will never sell it. Not only will I not sell it, I'll keep it safe. This is the foundation upon which I'll build my future life. As for Sophia Taylor, since Alexander Brown has generously taken on this burden, let him be responsible for it to the end. I'm not unwilling to take revenge, but the greatest revenge is letting go, is doing as she wished, letting her go rely on the good man she believes in. I'm very curious. Without me, this reluctant husband, standing in front to shield her, how much of the so-called true feelings between her and Alexander Brown can withstand the tests of reality? Hospital bills, the pressures of life, the torment of illness. Alexander Brown's little company looks impressive, but I know its cash flow has always been tight. Can he really give himself unreservedly the way he claims? And Sophia Taylor. What will she look like when she discovers that the good man she pinned her hopes on can't easily provide the best life? This is much more interesting than me taking revenge myself. After I sorted through these thoughts, I felt surprisingly at ease. The next day, I started the machine. Countless missed calls and messages poured in. Some were from Sophia Taylor, her mother, a few of my relatives, and even a few unknown numbers. Without exception, they were all condemnation, questioning, and pleading. I didn't reply to a single one. I went home first, grabbed a few changes of clothes and important documents. The house still bore traces of Sophia Taylor's life, but I no longer felt anything. Then I went to the office. I handed in my resignation directly to my supervisor. He was surprised and tried hard to persuade me to stay. "Ethan, I heard you have family matters. You can take leave. There's no need to quit. Your professional skills are excellent. The hospital values you highly." I declined his offer. "Mr. Wong, thank you, but I have other plans." I didn't mention Sophia Taylor's illness, only said it was for personal reasons. After finishing the resignation formalities, I felt a wave of relief. After leaving the Design Institute, I called my classmate who had started a business. "Hey Ben, it's me, Ethan. Joe, is the sun rising in the west? What made you think of calling me?" My classmate Benjamin Carter laughed on the other end of the line. "The thing you mentioned last time, about buying into your company, does that still stand?" I asked directly. Benjamin Carter was momentarily stunned, then grew excited. "It stands. Of course it stands. What? Have you finally wised up? Finally willing to leave that lousy Design Institute?" "Yeah, I'm out. Got time to meet and talk details." "Absolutely. Tonight is fine. The usual place. I'll buy you a drink." I hung up the phone and looked at the bustling street. A new life had begun, and my notoriety was spreading even faster. Through Sophia Taylor and her family's wailing, through Alexander Brown's deliberate or inadvertent embellishments, through those relatives, friends, and onlookers who didn't know the truth. I, Ethan Johnson, became scum who cold-bloodedly signed away treatment and washed my hands when my wife got cancer. Some local self-media public accounts even started writing little essays with vague headlines. Humanity questioned, wife in terminal cancer, husband seeks to abandon her with a single agreement. First love heroically intervenes. When will the indifferent husband come to his senses? The comment section was filled with curses directed at me. Men like this don't deserve to live. Trash. Godi. Sisters, stay strong. There are better men waiting for you. I looked at those comments, feeling nothing inside, even a little inclined to laugh. A blind frenzy. They need such a target to showcase their moral superiority. They do not care about the truth. Fine. Let those voices become background noise that severs me from the past. I kept my promise and went to see Benjamin Carter that evening. He had heard about what happened and asked cautiously, "Ethan, is something wrong at your home?" "I heard your wife." I took a sip of my drink and replied calmly, "Yes, she's ill, cancer." Benjamin Carter inhaled. "And you still?" I signed to refuse aggressive treatment. I said, looking at him. Benjamin Carter widened his eyes as if he didn't recognize me. "Ben," I put down my glass. "Let me tell you a story." I selectively told him about the 7 years from my previous life and, after my rebirth, the message I saw Sophia Taylor send to Alexander Brown. I didn't mention rebirth. I only said I discovered my wife had long belonged to someone else and had already lined up her next man as soon as she was diagnosed. Benjamin Carter was silent for a long time after hearing it. He slammed the table. "Fuck, what the hell is this? You did the right thing. Ethan, with a woman like that, a family like that, the sooner you get away, the better. Why the hell should I? I gave everything, and in the end I get all the blame." "Brother's got your back." He filled my glass. "Don't worry about the company. With you on board, I couldn't ask for more. It might be tough at first, but the future is definitely bright." At that moment, I knew I had found my first ally. Someone who understood part of the truth and chose to stand by my side. That is enough. I don't need the whole world to understand me. I only need to keep walking in my own direction. I didn't go back to the hospital, but news about that place still reached my ears intermittently, mostly through my mother. Although she had difficulty accepting it at first, after my conversation and some hints she'd heard from other sources, her attitude gradually changed. From initial reproach, it turned into worry and helplessness. Alexander Brown transferred her to another hospital, saying it was a private hospital with better facilities. They're using imported drugs, costing several $1,000s a day. Alexander Brown also hired a caregiver. My mother sighed on the phone. People outside are all saying that Alexander Brown is loyal and righteous. "Mom, let them talk." I cut her off. "Is Sophia Taylor satisfied now?" My mother was silent for a moment. Her family all praise Alexander Brown, saying Yusuf. I could imagine that scene. Sophia Taylor and her family gathered around her, grateful for Alexander Brown's timely help, while trampling me as a negative example. This was exactly what she wanted. "Ethan, what will you do from now on?" My mother asked anxiously. "I have plans, Mom, don't worry. You and Dad take care of yourselves." I hung up the phone and went back to my work. The collaboration with Benjamin Carter's company went smoothly. I invested a portion of the savings I had set aside to treat Sophia Taylor, and with my technical contribution as equity, I became a partner. The workload was intense, but I was full of energy. I was still keeping an eye on the renovation project for that old residential complex and quietly started doing some preliminary research. Life was busy and fulfilling. Occasionally, I would hear fragmented bits of news from mutual friends. Sophia Taylor seems to have had a strong reaction to her first chemotherapy. She was vomiting badly. At first, Alexander Brown seemed pretty proactive, but later he started going less often. I heard the costs were too high. Alexander Brown seemed a bit stressed, and I think he even had words with Sophia Taylor's mom. News was a mix of truth and rumor, but I could guess the general situation. The crushing weight of reality was beginning to show. Alexander Brown was not a saint. His generosity had its limits. And Sophia Taylor. How would she fare under the torment of illness and the weight of such a devastating psychological blow? About 2 months passed. Someone I hadn't expected came to find me. It was Sophia Taylor's mother, Margaret Taylor. She came straight to the temporary office I shared with Benjamin Carter. After not seeing her for months, she had aged considerably. Her face showed fatigue and worry. When she saw me, her expression was complicated. There was resentment, but more than that, a helpless plea. "Ethan," she said, her voice hoarse. "Aunt, is there something wrong?" I asked, gesturing for her to sit, my tone distant. "Ethan, I know. Sophie. She has wronged you." Margaret Taylor wrung her hands and said with difficulty, "But after all, she is your wife. She is legally, but not for much longer." I said calmly, "I've already instructed my lawyer to prepare the divorce papers." Margaret Taylor shot up her head and looked at me in shock. "You want a divorce? Or what?" I retorted. "She has Mr. Alexander Brown taking care of her now. Isn't that fine?" "No, Ethan." Margaret Taylor grew anxious. Alexander Brown. He's not reliable. Oh, I put on an expression of wanting to hear more. Margaret Taylor seemed to have found an outlet and began pouring out her grievances. At first he was quite good and generous with money. But after such a short time, he started complaining that the expenses were too high. The last time we paid the bill, he delayed for several days, and it was I who covered part of it. I even let go of the hired caregiver. Now I'm the one taking care of her. The moment he came, he started arguing with Sophie, saying money doesn't grow on trees. Sophie's in a terrible state, and her condition is unstable. She said, tears falling, "Ethan, I'm begging you, please, for the sake of our past." Alexander Brown. He seems to have other women on the side. I heard his company isn't doing well either. Sophie knows she was wrong. She's sorry. She cries every day, says she wants to see you. I listened silently, feeling no sympathy, only a cold sense of confirmation. See, just as expected. Regret? I repeated the words softly with a trace of mockery. Does she regret trusting Alexander Brown by mistake, or does she regret losing me, the dutiful backup who did all the work? Margaret Taylor was at a loss for words. "Aunt," I said to her as I looked at her. She chose the path herself. It was Alexander Brown who, in the ward with everyone watching, said with his own mouth, "I won't treat her, he will." It was Sophia Taylor who acquiesced to his kindness. Now you find Alexander Brown unreliable and remember my favor. My favor was already used up when she messaged Alexander Brown and asked him to decide. My tone was calm, but carried an unquestionable finality. Margaret Taylor looked at me, the hope in her eyes dying bit by bit. She probably finally understood that the Ethan Johnson who had always indulged Sophia Taylor and granted her every request was dead. Dead by the heart-piercing words her daughter spoke in the previous life. Dead on that cold medical bill. "Ethan, are you really that cruel? She's going to die." She was making a final effort. Life and death are fated. I stood up. "Auntie, I'm very busy. I won't see you out. The lawyer will contact you to sign the divorce papers. If she refuses, I'll file a lawsuit. The marital relationship has indeed broken down, and you've been separated for a long time. The court will rule in our favor." I walked to the door, opened it. The gesture clearly meant to see me out. Margaret Taylor rose in a daze, looking at me with eyes full of grievance and despair. "Ethan Johnson, you'll get your comeuppance." I smiled. "Maybe, but at the very least, I won't be stupid a second time." Margaret Taylor left. The office returned to silence. I looked out the window. The city remained noisy. Sophia Taylor's regret was exactly what I expected, but that regret was far too cheap. It didn't come from realizing she had betrayed my genuine feelings. It came because she discovered the fantasy of the better life she had chosen had collapsed. She wasn't reborn. She won't know what I sacrificed over those 7 years in the previous life. Her pain now stems only from the wrong choices she made in this life and the cruelty of reality. What does that have to do with me? In my heart, there is no pleasure in revenge, only a complete sense of release. Benjamin Carter's and my company gradually got on track. Although it was hard, the first project was completed well and started to make a profit. With the renovation project of that old residential compound, I also seized the opportunity to take part in a portion of it thanks to memories from my previous life and professional judgment, earning my first pot of gold after rebirth. I took out a loan to buy a small apartment. Not large, but enough for me to settle in. After a simple renovation, I moved in. Life finally had a new anchor. During that time, I heard that Alexander Brown's company had fallen into trouble due to a broken capital chain. He had completely disappeared from the hospital. It was said he went out of town to hide from his debts. Sophia Taylor's treatment had to be transferred from the expensive private hospital back to the public hospital. Her medication was also changed to the standard drugs covered by insurance. Her family began borrowing money from all over, but it had little effect. Those relatives, friends, and onlookers who had once praised Alexander Brown and spat at me grew much quieter. Reality is the best tool for smackdowns. Occasionally someone would bring it up, their tone turning rueful. It's pitiful after all. That Alexander Brown sounded so good back then, but in the end, Ethan Johnson may have been a bit ruthless, but he must have been hurt deeply too. The spectators always changed their tune so quickly. They never probed deeply jumping to conclusions based on appearances, and just as easily switching sides. I didn't care at all. In the end, Sophia Taylor signed the divorce agreement. She probably understood, too. There was no point in dragging it out. I didn't want any of the property, and of course I didn't take on any of the debts. We were completely done with each other. The day we got the divorce certificate was a sunny day. I went alone to have a sumptuous dinner, celebrating a new life. After the meal, I walked along the riverbank. The river breeze brushed my face, carrying the scent of moisture. I remembered the cold and despair of the final moment in my previous life. I think again of this life, the ease and freedom after letting go. Maybe human nature is inherently selfish. Sophia Taylor, in desperation, instinctively chose what she considered the way out, which is understandable. But her choice included a denial of and betrayal toward what I had given, and that I cannot forgive. Those on the bandwagon, the wanton critics, are nothing more than the clamor of human nature amplified by the crowd. I no longer need anyone's approval, nor do I live for anyone's gaze. Reborn once, I have seen human hearts clearly and found myself. That is enough. On the river in the distance, a ship passed, sounding a low foghorn, like a trumpet announcing a new life. I took a deep breath and stepped forward. My steps were steady. After the divorce, my life returned to complete calm. The once clamorous accusations and discussions, like receding tidewaters, gradually subsided. People are always forgetful, especially when new topics arise. I focused on my own career. My company with Benjamin Carter gradually began to pick up. Although still small in scale, it had already established a foothold in the industry. The renovation project for that old residential complex earned me a crucial sum of money and helped me build some connections. I moved into the small apartment I had bought with a loan. Life was simple and fulfilling. Occasionally, I would hear snippets about Sophia Taylor from my mother. After her treatment shifted to palliative care, her condition did not immediately worsen, but her body visibly deteriorated. Losing Alexander Brown's financial support, and because of the earlier high-profile transfer and medication, the family savings had long been exhausted. Her parents sold off some of the old family's worthless items, barely managing to get by. I heard that afterward, she was in a bad state emotionally, often snapping at her mother and complaining about the unfairness of fate. Her mother always sighed whenever she talked about these things. She's a pitiful person, too. I listened in silence, saying nothing. Pitiful? Perhaps. But much of her pitifulness stemmed from her own choices. She chose to rely on me while belittling me, and to betray me at crucial moments. She chose to believe Alexander Brown's extravagant promises instead of seeing the reality. This path was one she walked herself, and I am under no obligation to pay for her choices. One evening, after working late, I drove back to the apartment. While waiting at the red light, I happened to glimpse a familiar figure by the roadside. It was Sophia Taylor's mother, Margaret Taylor. She was standing at the entrance of a pharmacy, clutching a few coins in her hand, anxiously saying something to the clerk. She looked more aged and haggard than the last time she saw me. Her back was hunched, and large patches of her hair had turned white. The clerk looked troubled, pointing at the money in her hand, and then at the medicine on the counter, shaking his head. Despair washed over Margaret Taylor's face. She nearly dropped to her knees. The traffic light turned green. The car behind honked its horn. I pressed the accelerator, and the car slowly drove past the pharmacy entrance. In the rearview mirror, Margaret Taylor's figure grew smaller and smaller, eventually disappearing into the flow of traffic. A slight ripple stirred in my heart, but it soon calmed. This is no longer my responsibility. Everyone must bear the consequences of their own choices. She and her daughter are no exception. I step harder on the gas and merge into the night traffic. Outside the car window, the city's neon flickers, cold and distant. Time passed quickly, and before I knew it, more than a year had gone by. My small company took on a few good projects, and the team grew by a few people. Life gradually got back on track. I even began to accept my friends' kind intentions and tried going on blind dates. Although I haven't met anyone who makes my heart skip a beat, at least I've started to be willing to embrace a new life. One weekend, I went to the hospital for a routine checkup. After the examination, as I was about to leave, I saw in a corner of the outpatient hall a frail figure sitting in a wheelchair, being pushed by a caregiver. It was Sophia Taylor. I could hardly recognize her. chemotherapy, and the pain had wasted her away to skin and bone. Her face was waxy and pale, her eyes sockets hollow, and her hair so thin the scalp showed through. She was wrapped in a large old coat, staring vacantly at the floor. The woman who had once been delicate and a little proud had been completely consumed by illness. The caregiver pushing her looked impatient, glancing down at his phone from time to time. They seemed to be waiting for something. I had intended to slip away unnoticed, but Sophia Taylor seemed to sense something and slowly lifted her head. Her gaze wandered blankly over the crowd, then fixed on me. In that instant, a highly complex light suddenly burst forth in her hollow eyes. There was shock, disbelief, intense shame, and a faint yet clear plea. She opened her mouth, as if trying to call my name, but no sound came out. Her hand lifted slightly, then fell weakly back down. I just looked at her from a distance, my face expressionless. No hatred, no sympathy. As if I were looking at a complete stranger. The caregiver followed her gaze to me, sized me up a few times, seemed to find me somewhat familiar, then looked down and went back to playing on her phone. The hall was crowded with people, noisy and chaotic. Between us, only a short distance of a dozen or so meters lay, yet it felt as if an insurmountable space-time separated us. In my past life, I gave everything over 7 years. Those chilling, bone-deep words before death, I can't bear to let go. The message she sent to Alexander Brown after being reborn. The scene of her and Alexander Brown standing side by side in the hospital room. The look of despair and resentment in her eyes when signing the papers. Her family's curses at the time of the divorce. Countless images flashed through my mind in rapid succession, then finally settled into a profound silence. I withdrew my gaze without lingering, turned, and walked straight toward the hospital entrance. Outside, the sunlight was bright, almost glaring. From behind me came an unbearably suppressed whimper, like that of a wounded little animal. But soon, it was drowned out by the hospital's commotion. I didn't look back, not even once. Stepping out of the hospital, warm sunlight fell on me, dispelling the smell of disinfectant and the chill inside. I took a deep breath of fresh air. In that moment, I knew I had truly walked out. Completely, I walked out of that mire that had drained all the passion and life from my previous life. Her pain, her remorse, her fate, all of it was no longer my concern. In this life, I let go, and I let myself go as well. A few more months passed. A quiet afternoon. I received a call from my mother. Her voice was somewhat low, carrying a trace of complex emotion. "Ethan, Mom, what's wrong? Sophia Taylor passed away this morning." There was a few seconds of silence on the other end of the line. Her mother had someone deliver a message, saying, "Before Sophia Taylor died, she was delirious and called your name a few times. She said, 'I am sorry.'" I stood by the office window with my phone in hand, watching the busy traffic below. An unusual calm settled over me. No ripples, no sorrow, not even the slightest sense of pleasure. It was like hearing a distant, unfamiliar piece of news. "Oh," I replied softly. "The funeral arrangements, her family will handle it simply." "You see," Mother asked tentatively. "Mom, I'm not going," I said calmly. "It's not necessary." "Ah, I know." Mother sighed. "I just wanted to tell you. Don't overthink it." I know." "Thanks, Mom." After hanging up, I went back to the work at hand. The tapping of the keyboard sounded unusually clear in the office. After work, I went alone to a noodle shop I often visit and had a steaming bowl of beef noodles. It tasted very good. In the evening, I sat on the apartment balcony, watching the city's nightscape. The lights were dazzling. Behind every light, there might be a story. Sometimes joyful, sometimes sad. I thought of my previous life. After Sophia Taylor died, I felt hollowed out like a walking corpse. I felt life was meaningless. But now, my heart is calm, with a slight sense of anticipation for the future. The 3 words, "I'm sorry," are too light. So light they cannot measure the weight of the 7 years from the past life. So light they cannot erase the chill brought by the words, "I couldn't bear to let go." Moreover, that apology came from the edge of life. How much of it sprang from genuine remorse, and how much from fear of death and regret for the past, is already impossible to tell. I don't want to analyze it anymore. After being reborn, my greatest gain wasn't avoiding the fate of losing everything, nor was it getting a start in my career. It was that I finally understood that genuine affection should be given to those who deserve it, and I myself must come first. Only then can I be someone else's. Blind devotion and sacrifices made under the guise of moral obligation won't move someone who doesn't love you. They'll only drain you. Cold-hearted people will eventually reap what they sow. What I can do is stay away from the cold-hearted and cherish myself. The night breeze blows, carrying the warmth of early summer. I lifted the cup of plain tea beside me and took a sip. The taste was slightly bitter with a returning sweetness. It was exactly like life.